Hello, loved ones. I'm Chris Keeton, and welcome to this episode of my podcast, Random Acts. I'm so glad you're here. Listen, I got to tell you, all kinds of crazy shit has been going on. I mean, it's just like, this is like the wildest month of all. All kinds of crazy stuff. But first, before I get into the crazy stuff, I do want to give a shout out to my producer, Andrew Depew, because he got a nomination for a regional Emmy. And I just think that's so badass. Let's have a nice round of applause for him. How about it, studio audience? What do you think? Yeah. Okay. So, I just want to talk about 5 things before we get started. I got a great guest today. I think you're going to really enjoy it. I'm pretty sure that you will. But the other shout out I want to do is to a little t-shirt company in Tennessee. They're called Be Kind to Everyone. See, and I've got one of their t-shirts on. So this company started as, a project for their daughter who happens to have autism. But they put this project together, and now all the cool people have these t-shirts. My buddy Trey Bruce in Nashville is the one who told me about it. And now I've got a shirt, and I hope that you will go to their website and buy a shirt. BeKindToEveryone.com. Okay, thank you. All right, now I got 5 things for you. First off, I want to say my daughter, Maddie, has absolutely twice the personality and twice the sense of humor as me. So she's known all along that I'm scared to death of those friggin' flying monkeys in The Wizard of Oz. So, high school play, all those years ago, she got to be a flying monkey. Yeah. And come flying up through the aisles and scare the shit out of her dad. Yeah. So that's my daughter. That's 1. 2, I actually have more shoes in the closet than my wife. I'm sure that probably doesn't surprise you. Number 3, I love being the center of attention. Duh. And here's a good one. A friend of mine told me this when I first moved to Nashville. He said, buddy, if you want to make it in the music business, you either got to stick out or fit in. That's it. Okay, now, this is a big one, though. So, the concept of framing your language or choice of words to color, your world and the world around you. Okay, here's what I'm talking about. So, the basement in my house, the vibe is we want to turn it into the jungle room, just kind of like Elvis has at Graceland. So we've gotten all this stuff that they've been working on, and a lot of it's good, a lot of it's not so good. But the not so good is just like the floor is just not right. I mean, you step on it, it wiggles. Somebody told me the other day, oh, it's a floating floor. And I said, yeah, but it's not supposed to be. Anyway, my wife, who I dearly love, when she talks about it, she says it's a disaster. Now, disaster is a pretty strong word, I think. But in my way of talking about it, I just tell people it was a poorly executed plan. Because here's the thing. I mean, the plan was good. We were going to have a faux wood floor in the basement. But the execution of the plan was not so good. So anyway, framing your language, just that's something for you to think about. Maybe a little high level, highbrow. But I read a lot. Like Tommy Lee James said in the last episode, the problem is, Chris, you read too much. So, okay. We're all storytellers. And the whole idea about random acts is so that I can just talk about me, my life, your life, different kinds of things, all kinds of random stuff. Because that's the way life is. I mean, you plan things and then they don't work out, but 9 times out of 10, they work out better than you thought they were going to, most of the time, except for the poorly executed plan. But anyway, so, the through line in my life has always been music. And today's guest, James Lucent, is a dear friend of mine. He is not only a music guy, he was a studio owner, and then he became one of the bleeding edge guys in the social media world. He's going to talk to you about that when he comes on in a few minutes. But I'm telling you what, he's got that through line. I've got that through line. And let me just share 2 quick stories about my through line of music. So way back, like 1974, I played with Gary U.S. Bonds. Now, Gary was a big hit in the early 60s, had 3 big hits, and each one had a sax solo in it. So I figured if I'm in the band, I'll get as much spotlight as the lead guy, which it was really great. And it lasted for a while. And then when we came off the road, for whatever reason, I ended up in Hampton, Virginia, with a lot of time on my hands, no income. I was like 19 years old. So I get a part-time job as a metal technician with a sheet metal company, which essentially means that we take these big sheets of sheet metal and cut them. And not only do we cut the sheet metal, but we cut the bejesus out of our hands too. So anyway, turns out the guy that hired me had a band. And when, we were talking and he found out that I played sax, he said, dude, well, we're playing this Friday at the Moose Lodge. Why don't you come and play? Which I thought was a, okay idea. And he said, we'll pay you like $50. And then the idea became really good. So I thought, okay, I'll go. Well, comes time to go to the gig, and I'm thinking, I don't know what these guys are wearing. So I didn't give it another thought. I just took one of the outfits that I wore with Gary U.S. Bonds and thought this will be great. Well, it was a powder blue leisure suit. Yeah. And I also had on platform shoes. I mean, for that day and age, it was, as they say, in vogue. Well, I walked into the Moose Lodge and not so much. I mean, it was like I walked in the door shut behind me, everybody looked at me and froze. And I thought, wow, this is weird. Well, anyway, it was pretty weird. So that's one story. Okay, so here's my second story, and I hope that it's funnier than the first. So I was in this show band called Mardi Gras. We played all these showrooms throughout the Southeast, and it was pretty entertaining. Well, the keyboard player was a guy named Steve, probably the funniest, most witty person I've ever met in my whole life. So we come off the stage one night, and I happen to be standing next to Steve. And this poor guy comes up, and he had a really, really pronounced stutter. And I'm not making fun of that because it's not funny. It's just a thing. He comes up to the stage, he gets Steve's attention and goes, what? And Steve goes, Richmond. And the guy said, thank you, and walked off. Again, not making fun of the stutter, making fun of Steve's wittiness. Anyway, once again, I'm Chris Keeton, and listen, we got a great guest coming up in just a couple of minutes, so hang on for my buddy, James Lucent. Friends and neighbors, I'm going to tell you what, I've got my buddy, James Lucent. We have some history. We got some great stuff to share. And I do have to tell you, though, that he, to me, is one of the people that he was an actual, seriously, a bleeding edge pioneer of social media. How's that? You like that, James?
I do.
How you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm doing great. How are you? I haven't seen you even on a Zoom, and it's been a while.
Yeah. Well, but it's it goes without saying that, of course, I still look fabulous.
You do.
Yeah.
Well, I told you before we got on there, I was like, what am I going to wear? And then it was a quick decision. It doesn't matter because you're always going to look better. So, but that's okay.
Yeah. So, okay. So just so the people who are listening, the 5 people who listen to the podcast can know a little bit about you. You and I met each other 20 some years ago, right?
It's 20 years, man. I was just thinking about that. It was 20 years this year, I think, or last year. And I was repping songwriters, or
Yeah.
just started repping songwriters. And a guy named Guy, I think, actually, um, was his name Guy? It's like, you got to meet this guy, Chris Keaton. He's a song plugger in Nashville. And I was like, what's a song plugger? So uh, that's how we met.
Yeah.
Like, and um, and we can get to that in a minute, but I mean, you want to know how I got to there, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So just give me the arc of your narrative from Connecticut to getting to the Nashville connection when we hooked up.
yeah, so gosh, the short story is I wanted to be a rock star since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And um I didn't start actually playing music till I was about 14 or 15 when my parents got a piano, and I got totally absorbed into that. And then I was like, the girls don't really go after the keyboard player, so I learned how to play guitar. Um and attempted to go to college at Northeastern in Boston, and lived right around the corner from Berkeley. And this was in 1989. And I started a band almost immediately, and playing guitar, playing keys, and singing. And it created a business. Like, I had a big enough apartment where I could get kegs and have kids, and well, don't say kids, but um, in 1989, it it wasn't that big a deal. Anyway, and I got to play music, and I was like, what do I need school for? I can making money, and I'm playing in a band. And so my college career was, very short-lived, but the music never stopped. That led me to, in a couple of years, moving back to Connecticut, where I studied a lot of guitar in Boston by this brilliant guy named Dave, and David Charles, who I actually went to high school with. And he and his twin brother were like just staples in the music scene there. And that guy would come to my place, and we would sit there and just jam. And then I would spend 6, 8 hours a day and listening to like Stevie Ray Vaughan CDs on a carousel, attempting to play all that stuff. So anyway, I moved back to Connecticut. I wanted to start a band. uh, my dad was like, "You need a backup plan. You're already recording music. What do you know about making records?" And me, I'm like you. When somebody's like, "Do you know how to do that?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I sure do." So um, I literally gathered some money, invested a big chunk of money that would have gone to college, and built a recording studio in Stamford, Connecticut. And those of you who don't know Stanford, it's 25 minutes from New York City. So basically everyone in Stanford, I grew up in a town next to that called New Canaan. And so there was a lot of music business people there who worked in New York City. But what that created was an enormous scene of everyone is friends with a cousin of Clive Davis or Tommy Mottola or whatever. So everyone was making demo tapes to give to these guys. Um, and so while I was trying to create a band, I started making records and demos for people, and it was a great business. This was the emergence of like burning CDs for the first time on a Marantz player that cost $4,000, and the stock was like $20 a CD. So I created this huge business of making demos for people, and I loved it. So that took me from like 1991 to just about 2000. I can't even, I worked with some super, just because of the where I was proximity wise. Like, I was working with Rick Ocasek's kid,
Wow.
and I wrote a record with Nile Rodgers. I was 22, and this producer I was working with was like, "Hey, you know who Nile Rodgers is?" And I was like, "Nope." And um, because I was just kind of like coming out of like my like hair metal phase, and so he's like, "Yeah, he wrote hits for Madonna, and he's doing this record for a friend, and he's going to do all the solos, but we need to write the music for it." And they wanted it acoustic, so like I wrote this whole, like, I think we did like 8 or 10 songs, and Niall came in and did the solos, and I'm like, you know in the presence of genius and didn't even realize it. And I was friends with Phil Ramone too. I knew his nannies, and so we hung out, and I hung out with Phil and his family, and this is when I was getting into producing, and I was just so ignorant. Like, but I guess it was cool to like not be like fangirling over these people while
Yeah.
I'm hanging out with them. Anyway, so it was a really cool place and to be for music at that time in the 90s. And then it just kind of started dwindling down. Sold the studio, uh, met a girl, moved to Miami, and then I was like, what am I going to do? And that's when MySpace came out. And I
Hmm.
was like, man, look at all this talent on MySpace. Why don't I grab it? What can I do with it? And that's where I first started finding writers and learned about publishing. And that's kind of how you and I connected. And then I was like, well, managing writers is really kind of boring. Um, let's develop artists. Let's take all this studio knowledge and production and songwriting and start finding artists. And that's where Nashville kind of came in, because everyone's like, if you want songwriters, you got to go to Nashville. And I was like, I don't know. Didn't know anything about Nashville. And so you and I met. Um, I think we knew each other on, just through the phone and online for about close to a year. And then I showed up there and met you for the first
Yeah.
time. And I'm sure it was over. I think it was that Australian kid, Pete, that I was working with.
Hmm.
And he making a record with gosh, I forget the guy's name. Comes so long ago. Anyway, um, and then you and I connected. You were pitching songs that I had written, and I made some headway with that. And so, like, you really kind of schooled me on how that all works, and song plugging and songwriting, and I thought I was a great songwriter till I came to Nashville for the first time and sat in a listening session, and then you introduced me to guys like John Ozier, who's just the man now.
Yeah.
Like that guy, I could text that guy right now, and just because you introduced him to me, he will text me right back.
Yeah.
And
No,
Fred Mullin,
he's a
and
class act. Yeah.
yeah,
And
I've
Gilles.
even though that's not really what I do now, like when I come across somebody, I'll take a meeting with him and bring in the artists, and just kind of be like, here you guys go, here's the connection.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, that's not really my thing now, but
Hmm.
if I see someone that's worth that, I make it happen. And those are, all of my really big music connections happened after I met you and you introduced me to there's like Gilles Godard and um, who else? Gardner Cole
Oh yeah,
and
Gardner.
holy cow! You introduced me
Sure.
to. You were like, hey, we were developing this artist Misty, and you were involved in that. And Gardner wanted to. You were like, you got to meet this guy Gardner, and I called Gardner, and Gardner's like, hey, come out to Arizona. And hey, I got an extra place where you guys can stay for the week while you're out here. Like, I don't even know him,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what a classy dude. I still am in touch with him.
Yeah. Me too. Well, but I got to interject here though, and
Yeah,
I appreciate everything that you're saying about me, but you also brought a lot to the table too. I mean, you introduced me to one Preston Leatherman. You and I had a sit down meeting with Austin Mahone when he was just
yeah,
starting to break. I mean, a lot of really cool stuff that you brought to the table, and you have. And at that point, when we met, you had skills like you say, you were on the bleeding edge there of MySpace stuff. I didn't even,
that's
it
where we
didn't mean,
found Krista Marie too.
yeah, yeah, who's actually gone on now. She hosts a TV show.
Yeah,
So, so,
yep.
so, I mean, what's the line from the movie? You're no slouch. Oh yes, you're an incredible slouch, but
I'm sorry,
which is
I'm
not,
short. You're a
yeah,
tremendous slouch.
yeah, which is nice. But
Yeah,
anyway, so we were able to connect with a lot of that. But you also have the technical skills and the understanding of social media. So that's kind of where you are now, right?
sure. Yeah. Well, that kind of evolved as I when I was like, okay, I'm gonna develop artists. I picked a target group, which was tweens and teens, and because I was living in that world, that's where social media first evolved. I just happened to be one of the first a few people that was like, this is where all the money's going to be made. I mean, Jesus, we were shopping Preston Leatherman in 2015 or 2014, 2015 with millions of views on YouTube, and you were part of this, and labels were like, why do we care about that? Why do we? And I'm like, because you can make a lot of money on that. We could get brands in here, brand deals, and they were like, like I flew out to meet with Preston. I think it was 2015, 2016. You were out in LA for the Grammys. We went out to do meetings with James Foster, and we sat with James in David's office, at what was the Island or Republic or whatever it
Yeah.
was, and they're showing his videos that are going viral, and people were just like, yeah, but what is that? I would never forget this. Like, what does that mean to record sales? And I was like, this is where everything is going to go.
Yeah.
And they thought I was nuts,
Yeah, but I mean, the fact is, you got there early. You were able to identify that's because now, as you well know, when you take an artist into a label, the first thing they want to know is, what are their socials like?
What are your socials? Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, what I was getting at, so somehow that just kind of morphed into well, when my son was born, I kind of stepped away from the artist development stuff. Not kind of, I really did. And everybody wanted social media, and that was 2016. And, I seemed to be, I'm 55 now, so I was still pretty old in that game then. But I seem to be the only one seeing how to monetize it. And not only that, but offering that to parents as a way for their kids to make money. All these young kids who were making records with me, their parents were like, yeah, we want our kid to make money and be famous. And I'm like, yeah, well, how about if we give them a career?
Yeah.
And maybe you don't even sell any music, and
well, and to that point, I vividly remember the first time I ever heard anybody say this: build a sustainable business model. That was your vibe, that was what you were preaching to people.
Yeah. And it was an uphill battle because they weren't even calling these kids influencers yet. They were saying this is all kids stuff. But look where it is now, and it's everything now. It's literally everything.
So do you just work with music guys now, or you do all kinds of stuff?
No, I don't take this the wrong way, but most music people can't afford what I do. They should. It's not that they don't have the money; they just put their money in the wrong places.
Right.
Like when an artist comes to me today and they're like, they still come to me and they're like, yeah, man, I just spent $50,000 recording 10 songs, and I'm like, well, you just spent $48,000 too much and recorded 9 too many songs. So, where's your what do you have set aside for marketing? For every dollar you spend on development, you should have $2 for marketing. And they're like, well, I don't know what that means. They usually say, they just don't have business plans. They don't have a plan. So I heard that way too many times. And the typical artist is like, yeah, I don't know, but I'm gonna be huge, and then I'll give you a piece of that. And I'm like, yeah, but I can't go to Publix and buy anything with this guy's going to be huge. I'll give you a piece of it when I get it.
Yeah.
Right. So, it just, what I did was when my son was born, I applied what I was doing with artists to him as a baby and made him pretty famous.
I remember that.
And, we didn't have to pay for any of anything ever. Like once he was 6 months old, and then by a year, he had like 20,000 followers, and I was calling up every toy company in the world saying, hey, we'll do this. His 3rd birthday was sponsored by Mattel. They sent us an entire room full of Thomas stuff to sponsor the birthday party. You were there.
I totally remember that. And the other thing that I remember telling people, because I was so proud of you and what you were doing, and I was telling people, they'd say, well, what makes him so good? And I said, well, I'll tell you what makes him so good. His kid, who can barely even talk, has 25,000 followers. And every brand in the world for kids is chasing after him.
Right. And he was a great example of people are like, well, how do you know what to do with a company? And it's like, I, the reason why I used him first was it was the toughest space to excel in, the baby space, right?
Mm-hmm.
The baby toddler space. Everyone's on there with especially that early in social media. Everyone had an account for their kid. And so I analyzed all the accounts, meaning that I just looked through all these accounts and I'm like, what do they all do? What are they doing? And I was like, this is what they're not doing. No one is giving the kid a voice because probably no one ever thought, hey, well, a 6-month-old can talk. But I did. I was like, I'm going to give him a voice. And then as he ages, we'll get a little more vocabulary. And, of course, I gave him my kind of smarmy attitude and people started talking to him, but brands loved it because who's going to argue with it was, and this is pre-AI too. So this was, I had to write all this stuff, I had to come up with all this stuff. And um, so he had like this very sarcastic slant on everything, and no one was going to argue with a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old. And brands loved it. So anyway, what I'm saying is the same thing applies to companies now. It's the people are like, what are you gonna do? I'm like, I'm gonna find your voice and I'm gonna find your audience, and then I'm gonna connect them with the content that makes the most sense. And it's really that simple, in my brain at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of like back to like Carnegie's how to make friends that are influence friends. What is it?
How to win
friends.
friends and influence people.
I'm
That's
like,
it.
that's like the perfect handbook for social media. I tell people that all the time, and it was written in what, the 30s,
Yeah.
something like.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I've done credit card companies. I've done really, there isn't anything that I haven't done.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, gosh, yeah. So
All right. Let me
kind
ask
of
you
that,
that. Okay. Okay. So we got time for a couple more things, but I got to
yeah.
ask you. So tell me, what's the craziest thing that anybody's pitched to you that says, "Hey, I want you to take over my, social media"?
So there was this guy who was a cab driver in New York City who filmed his feet while he drove. And he called me up and like I'm listening and he's like, yeah, people love feet. And this is like before like Feet Finder
Yeah.
and Only Feet and all that was like real popular. Um, and he's like, yeah, I drive my cab barefoot and I film it and people love it. And I'm trying to get more people to get in my cab and film their feet. And I'll never, like, I'm like you, I'm like trying not to laugh. Right. And he's like, well, here are some sites where you can check this stuff out. And I'm like, oh man, I don't really know if I, you know, want that job that bad. But I'm talking to him on the phone and I was like, yeah, I guess people have some pretty crazy obsessions, which was like the wrong thing to say to this guy. And he launched into like how healthy it is to love feet. And like, I mean, he could have been talking about diamonds. It was like, and really my appreciation for people's fetishes certainly had a little bit of an education on that phone call. Um, I did not get that job.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever followed through on it. Um, it just it seems so bizarre.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I was like, what if I'm great at this too? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm seeing feet all day long.
All right, man. Please do me a favor. Tell the audience how they can find you.
So you can find me at lucentesocialmedia.com. My Instagram should be the exact same, but it's not, just because I've had it for so long. It's Lucente Entertainment on Instagram. Um, I'm always open to consulting with people to let them know what we could do with their social media, any kind of digital marketing. I do have a substantial firm, so it's not just me. There's a team of 7 that work for me. And really, there's no sector that I have not excelled or built a business in and amplified their marketing a ton. So, and then my email is james@lucentesocialmedia.com. and it's what I do. So I'm always on there. So anyone messages me, DMs me, whatever, I'm sure I'll get back to you pretty quickly.
Dude, that's awesome. I also got to tell you too. I was around hanging out with you when your son came along, and dude, you're a great dad. I mean, of all of the cool things that I've seen you do, that's the coolest. So my
Appreciate
hat's
that.
off to
And
you.
I remember asking you for a lot of advice early on too, because you are a great dad as well, and you were, I think, if not the first, one of the first people in the hospital when he was born too.
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah.
and his name is Christopher. So,
That's a heavy cross for me to bear. I don't mind telling you.
so
Well,
and
James,
what
go.
I was gonna say, and you were the best man at my wedding too,
Yeah, true.
which is and Preston was there as well. That's
Yeah,
how you know that was the cool thing about doing stuff with you. Like we really did stuff family style. It was
yeah.
like it wasn't just you're. I don't know. We put a lot of heart in everybody. That's why it was tough for us to let some people go.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
you got
And
really involved.
and again, I mean, just like everybody's just heard, you have always been so far ahead of the curve that when you explain stuff to people, a lot of people just go, I don't know. And I was guilty of that. I vividly remember having lunch with you in Preston. This was about the 1st of November, and Preston had already done this, dancing thing on YouTube where he had on, ear pods, and he's
Yeah.
listening to music that people can't hear, and he's dancing
Mhm.
through the mall. And it was pretty good, and we're having lunch, and you and I are talking about what we're going to do with Preston to help him break through. And he says, "Hey, I think I'm going to do another video. I'm going to use a Christmas song." And I remember looking at him like, "Well, that's nice." And then I started talking to you again. He goes and films a friggin' video, and what did we end up with? We ended up with ended up with millions of views.
Millions of views.
Crazy.
Millions of views, tons of interviews,
Yeah.
Inside Edition, Entertainment Week, like
Yeah.
every news, every national news outlet
Yeah.
found us,
Yeah.
and which taught me how to deal with all that PR stuff back then too, and that was before TikTok, that was before Vine, that was
No.
that was YouTube,
YouTube.
like,
Yeah. That was it.
so
Yeah.
it's you never know, and that's why in social media and in the digital world, like I very rarely say no to anything because I there are a lot of platforms that come and go, and I kind of just like, yeah, well, I'm always focused on Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok, and who knows what's going to happen with all those. But
Yeah.
I don't think Meta is going anywhere, meaning Facebook and Instagram. I think
Mm-hmm.
those are just the shopping malls of the world,
Yeah.
as they evolve, and really for anybody out there, you have to be your brand. No longer is the brand, a can of Coke. That
Mm-hmm.
is and has been and will always be, but there's very few brands that emerge now that don't have some sort of personality behind it.
True. Well,
But
dude, thank you so much. I really
thank you.
appreciate you being here. And
I appreciate it. I love what you're doing, by the way. And look, anyone who's listening to this, I can't stress this enough that your ability to connect people is like you were my Rolodex. Like it was insane. And it's not like, oh yeah, I just met this person. It's like you have deep connections with people that I've never seen with anybody else. So, you are amazing person to know and have in your life. So I hope that people understand that reach out to you. You're just not some guy like flipping through a phone book or something.
well,
So
I really appreciate it, man. You're not only a great friend, but a great colleague, too. I really appreciate you.
Sure, man. We
All
got to
right.
do something together soon.
All right, but I'll look forward to it. Thank you. Woo! Now, how did you like that? I mean, James is like one of the coolest guys ever. And like his physique, I mean, the whole thing. Anyway, so before I let you go, I got to talk to you about a couple of other things too. So, because this, as we're taping this, it's springtime, it's graduation from high school, graduation from college, all that kind of stuff. Well, I'm fortunate enough every year to give 2 scholarships to 2 high school students in Vinton, Virginia, in the name of my dad, Dr. Herbert L. Keeton, and in the name of my mother, Marie Janine Dearman. Yes, I'll get it right one of these days, Marie Janine Dearman. But when I was about to graduate from high school, back in those days, you had to have a meeting with your guidance counselor. And this was actually the end of junior year because they were trying to figure out if you're going to go to college prep or into the trade part of things. So it's just both are good. But so I go in to meet Mr. Foley, my guidance counselor. And he says, so what are you thinking about doing, when you get out of school? And I said, well, I'm either going to be a musician or a journalist. And without missing a beat, he said, well, good. Be prepared to starve. Be prepared to starve. I can't even begin to tell you how pissed off I was. But that anger motivation drove me when I got out of high school and I was in college and then I left college and I went on the road playing. I thought about that all the time. And I made it so that drove me to be as successful as I am. And I think I'm fairly successful. In my mind, I'm a friggin' rock star. So everything works out. The good news is that just a few years ago, he had already retired. But they were calling me from the high school to see if I was going to do the scholarship again. And they said, well, great. If you're going to do it, we're going to let you speak to Mr. Foley. And I'm like, whoa, he's back? And they said, yeah, he's filling in for the ladies. So I spoke with him on the phone, and I got to remind him of that. And I also got to thank him for that motivation. So there you go. That's that story. Now, once again, I got to say I'm so happy to be here at Blue Ridge Public Television in the podcast studio with my director, producer, king of the universe as we know it today, Andrew Depew, who happens to be up and nominated for a regional Emmy. And I'm so pleased and I'm so proud. And I really am wishing the best for him. Hope that everything works out. Okay, here it comes. Hard sell. Hard sell. I have written 2 books. Yes. And both of these books are for sale. One is about being a gentleman. The other one is about having confidence. Neither of these things do I know anything about, but that didn't preclude me from writing the books. And I hope it won't preclude you from buying the books. They're both available on Amazon, or you can get them from me. You can reach out to me, Chris, at chriskeeton.com. Send me an email. We'll work something out. I'll make sure that you get the books. Okay, the song inside you. Once again, I've got this plan. If you are of a certain age, kind of like my age, and you have had a career your whole life, but you never gave up the dream of being a songwriter, I got the program for you. Here it is. You purchase the program. We fly you to Nashville. Sorry, no, we don't fly you to Nashville. You get yourself to Nashville. We get you into a nice hotel room. Yes, we pay for that. We get you in with a hit songwriter. Yes, we do that. The next day, you go in with that hit songwriter into an A-class studio in Nashville and record a demo of your song. Woo-hoo-hoo! And the next day, you fly home with this music. How cool is that? Chris at chriskeeton.com. Reach out to me. Now, people want to know, Chris, how can I find you? Well, Facebook, Chris Keeton Music. Instagram, at Chris J. Keeton. That's where you can find me. Or you can find me right here. And I hope that you will subscribe to the channel. Once again, I'm Chris Keeton. This is Random Acts. And I just want to say, thank you. Can we edit out the part where I was
I made a note.
fucking dying? Shit.